Welcome to the Andy Social Podcast. This is episode 174 with Nadine Champion. But before we get into this episode, if we are meeting for the first time, how you doing? My name is Andy Dowling, and in addition to hosting this podcast, I also play bass in the Australian metal band Lord. And if you haven't heard our music before, you can go over to lord.net.au. There are video clips, there's our whole back catalogue, streaming music, lots of historical information. There's links to our online store. All of our social media links are there as well. It's a great way to get a taste of what our music is all about. And we've been around for quite a few years now. And as it stands right now, we have a brand new album that's coming out at the end of April called Fallen Idols. And the first single, United, Welcome Back, is now out, and you can go over to lord.net.au/United. You can search for United on YouTube as well, and I'm sure that by the time this is being recorded, it'll probably be on Facebook video as well. Well, it should be. So you can go and check all of that out. If you are enjoying our music and you enjoy the new single, please share it around. As I've been saying in previous episodes, it's been about 5+ years. 5+ years since Digital Eyes came out, our last studio album. And we have been doing a lot in between. We've been doing, we put out a live album, a box set, we did re-recording, EP. We've done heaps of stuff in between, but it's been a long time between albums. So I'm a little bit nervous. I'm hoping that we can reach as many people as possible. So if you have a couple of minutes to share some of our music around, especially the new single, that will mean the world to me. And I'm hoping that we can connect with as many metal fans as possible around the world. We're pretty confident, not cocky, we're just a little bit confident that if metalheads and metal fans can hear our music, then I think they're going to enjoy what we're doing. This album's going to be a really big one for us, at least for ourselves personally, and we're really, really excited to share it with all of you guys as well. So go and check it all out, lord.net.au. Thank you, as always, for the support. When I'm not flicking my hair back and forth, I also host a second podcast called the Self-Starter Podcast, which is all about small business, self-employment and freelancing. So if you run your own business, or maybe you're hoping to start your own business, or maybe you know somebody that's keen to do it, go and check it out, selfstarter.com.au. We also focus on people that are doing freelancing, people that have a little bit of a side hustle, earn a bit of pocket money on the side, just anything that involves a little bit of your own initiative to create your own desirable lifestyle, which I always say on the podcast. So go to selfstarter.com.au. There's a blog there with heaps of content. There is a fortnightly podcast episode that comes out. Season 1 wrapped up at the end of 2018. Season 2 is going to be out in June this year. If you've got any guest recommendations for Season 2, please let me know. I'm keen as mustard, whatever that means, to get as many guests on for Season 2 as possible. So I'm still recording as we speak, so please let me know. But go and check it out, selfstarter.com.au. Thank you. This week's shout out, every week I thank somebody that supports me in the podcast, the band, whatever. And heaps of different ways you can do so. It could be leaving a review on Facebook or on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. I think you can leave a review over there. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Positive messages of encouragement, feedback. It could be buying some merchandise. It could be shouting me a beer via the PayPal button over at andysocial.net. It all helps, keeps this podcast and keeps me motivated and driven to keep going. This week's shout-out is for Liam Anthony. Liam is from Brisbane. This is the second shout-out he has got on this podcast. So thank you, Liam. And the reason why he's getting another shout-out is he sent me a beer shout via the PayPal button over at andysocial.net. So thank you so much, Liam. Liam plays in a couple of bands up in Brisbane, Dragon's Mead and also Elkinwood. People that have been listening to the podcast for a while will know that I've given away some Elkinwood CDs in the past. So a few of you have got an Elkinwood CD in your collection. So there you go. And Liam also does his own graphic design. So you can go to stuffbyliamanthony.com. He's a freelance designer as well as a musician. So go and check all that out. Thanks, Liam. When you hear this, shoot me a message and I will flick you out some little goodies in the post, because we all love getting something in the mail. Now, in addition to this, I'm going to start doing a few more shout-outs on this. Not going to send anything out, but just a little bit of a thank you. If you guys go to andysocial.net/buy stuff, you'll be able to see links to a whole range of different things that I sell. It could be Lord, Dominus Records, all the bands and projects underneath Dominus Records. It could be Andy Social, the podcast. It could be my eBay or Discogs stores as well. You can check it all out by going to andysocial.net/buy stuff. There's heaps of stuff on there. A lot of my personal collection from a music point of view is on there. Lots of rubbish and knickknacks. I've even got some of Jess's stuff on there, shoes and clothes. So any ladies listening in, you might want to go and have a look. And yes, folks, they're not mine. I don't have the body to wear Jessica's clothes or shoes, so that's why they're on eBay. So there you go. Go over to andysocial.net/buy stuff. And massive thank you to Sebastian from St. Hyacinth in Canada, Daniel from Singleton Heights in New South Wales, ×2. He's ordered a couple of things from Discogs. Joachim from Hade in Austria, Aaron from Bath in the UK, Slot from Gersham in Oregon in the US, Simon from Chelsea in Victoria, and Jack from Bernogan in Queensland. Bernogan? Maybe it sounds very close to Bonegan in Queensland. And I'll rattle off a few more in the upcoming podcast. But thank you so much, folks, for supporting me by buying a whole bunch of stuff online. Really appreciate it. Part of that money goes back into the podcast and also funds a few other little projects that I have going along the side, which all will be revealed in the coming months. So thanks, folks. Really appreciate it. This week's episode is with Nadine Champion. Nadine is an inspiring international keynote speaker, author, awarded martial artist with over 30 years of experience. I'd read that straight off her website, but she is incredible. I saw Nadine talk last year in 2018 and got a copy of her book, which is called 10 Seconds of Courage, and subsequently read it. And it is just an incredible book. And Nadine's been through so much over the years, right from being a child, going through all these different moments of adversity and really challenging herself. And I don't want to give away the book, but she's done everything from being a security guard to a bodyguard. She's relocated to LA and learned martial arts with Benny the Jet, Sensei Benny, as Nadine refers to, and has had this amazing career as a martial artist, and now is a motivational speaker, keynote speaker, and is on the path of creating more content to be able to help other people. And Nadine, a little while ago, also did a TEDx talk, which is just an amazing display of courage and just a really, really impressive thing to watch, which I'm going to put in the show notes over at andysocial.net. We went on a whole bunch of tangents, and in true Andy style, I just saw shiny things and went for it. So bear with us with the erratic way of following this. I didn't really go down a timeline of events because I think her book does that. And I really want people to check out this book and read it because it goes into a lot of depth about what she's experienced over the years and all those lessons that she's learned along the way. And something that I got out of this book, which we mentioned towards the end of this episode, is that a lot of the things that Nadine's experienced are things that we all experience on a day-to-day basis. And in some cases, the way that she's experienced it is far more extreme than us. But I think the fundamentals are still there. And often a lot of the feelings that we have on a day-to-day basis, we don't actually acknowledge or have full awareness of. And a really cool thing with this book is that Nadine has been able to articulate it in a way that really simplifies these feelings and gives clarity to them. And so as I'm reading it, I'm sort of looking at it and going, oh, I can see the parallels. I can see where in my life I've had these same feelings, and I'm seeing what Nadine has done to be able to get through these periods in her life. And that sort of gives me some instruction and some action of how I can manage my day-to-day and the challenges that I have along the way as well. So enough crapping on from me. You can go to nadinechampion.com. I'm going to have all the links in the show notes over at andysocial.net, and I'll reiterate all the links after this chat. But for now, please enjoy this really, really cool chat with Nadine Champion. So I read your book towards the end of last year, and that's when I approached you to get you onto the podcast. So I'm glad it finally happened.
Great.
And I don't want to give away all the spoilers because I think people really need to read this book, but there's so many things as I was writing out notes and getting things together to chat to you that there's just so many interesting things and stages in your life that are worth talking about. And I think one big thing that's a reoccurring theme on my podcast and talking to different people is around self-awareness and discipline and being able to sort of work through adversity and overcome, I guess, that inner self-talk or negative self-talk. And your story, and as it's documented in this book, it just covers everything and more. Like, I wrote down a list of things such as courage, adversity, mentors, self-reliance, self-discovery, self-love. There's so many selves in there, and ownership and discipline. But I guess one thing, maybe just to kick it off, is one part of the book that just really struck a chord with me, and I wrote it down as I was actually reading the book, was how would you treat your 3-year-old self? And it's something that is just overlooked. And when you pitched it this way, it just struck a chord with me. But are you able to explain a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, sure. It's I just call it 3-year-old you. And Sensei Benny, when he was teaching me martial arts, he was also teaching me all of these ways to change my thinking. And one of the ways was by imagining yourself as a tiny little version of yourself when you were a kid, because as we grow into adults, we carry all of these value judgments about ourselves and experiences, and we change how we see ourselves from the simplicity of how we were when we were children. So Sensei Benny was trying to get me to visualize this person that I used to be, and then to try to bring that with me in my adult life. So I had not just my current version of myself, but someone else that I was responsible for looking after. And I really liked that idea because it changed the way I made decisions about myself. It changed my behavior because it added in another step to the thought process. So instead of just making simple decisions based on my current value system and beliefs about myself, based on my experiences as an adult, it added in this little extra step, which was, but what if I was just looking after, this little person who is simple and deserves good, healthy choices and to be happy and not be stressed? And, it's a simple thing when we look at children. If you're a good person, you'll look at them with love and compassion and treat them gently and kindly, and, all of the things that sometimes people struggle to do to other people as adults, but mostly to themselves. It sounds counterintuitive, but, if it wasn't true, then the world wouldn't be surrounded with, people who numb. So people who numb through gambling or alcohol or food or Tinder or whatever the thing is these days that, people use to numb how they feel because it's difficult.
I think...
Does that make sense to you?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, and that's sort of an extension of how you explained it in the book, because, I mean, there's that old cliche that sort of, and it's funny with cliches because they get drummed into your head and it almost loses its meaning. And it's only when you go through that situation yourself that you go, oh, now I understand why people say that all the time. But one of those things is you are your own worst enemy. And it sort of ties in with that, where we're so judgmental of ourselves, and there's so much criticism of what we do. And for me, like, just of my own experiences, that imposter syndrome and the things that we neglect ourselves because we're always worried about everybody else around us. So we're comparing ourselves, or we're trying to care for other people, or whatever it might be. And that's fine, but there has to be a balance with yourself and a bit of self-care and self-love, which, that's sort of the secret sauce in a way to ensuring that you can live a healthy and fulfilling life.
Yeah, and the ideas of self-care and self-love, like Sensei Benny would say that kind of thing to me, and factor in he's an undefeated world champion fighter, and the thing that we had in common was martial arts or kickboxing. So the ideas of self-love and self-care sound a bit more like you would hear them in a hippie commune as opposed to a boxing ring. But, really, there's so much pressure in society to achieve and to do and to look the right way and have enough money and drive the right car and all that stuff. And people make decisions based on their value system about what matters to them. So are they going after the perfect body, the perfect job, the perfect partner? It's just part of life. It's very natural. But sometimes we end up, making these decisions without factoring in self-love and self-care. And unfortunately, people can pay the price at a later date. Say like the high-flying corporate person, or the cliche of the guy who's in his in his 50s and 60s, and he's reached, C-level executive in a big company, and he's making the money, and he's had all of the things that come with success. But then, his kids are in their early 20s, and they say, why weren't you ever there?
Mm.
Or he starts to have the health effects. Maybe he has an early heart attack because he never looked after his health. Or maybe he went running every lunchtime, but he was under so much pressure for 25 years that his cortisol levels are sky high.
Absolutely.
And then it starts to catch up with him. So each decision that we make, especially the big decisions about how we're going to spend our time and who we're going to be as people, what we're going to go after in life, if you don't factor in that idea of something like 3-year-old you and balance out the pursuit of what you want with making sure it's in alignment with taking good care of yourself, there's a price to pay often. So it's just factoring that in. And, a lot of people do things that, seem crazy to other people. Say, I don't smoke, but I know people who do. And I look at them and I think, oh, gee, I wish you didn't. Like, I care about you. I wish you wouldn't do that. And, no judgment to anybody who does, but in a caring way, I look at them and I think, oh, if I could choose for you, I'd choose for you to not do that. And sometimes in a training role, in a fitness training role with people, I've said, how do you feel about the fact that you smoke? And then I've taught them about 3-year-old you and said, would you give your child a cigarette? And straight away their face changes, like, no, of course not. But then I get them to explain to me why not. Like, of course you wouldn't because you're not allowed to and it's wrong. But explain to me the actual why underneath it. Mm. Because it would harm them, because it's not good for them, because I love them and I wouldn't want to do that to them. And then, if you frame it in, but what about 3-year-old you, it can just alter your self-perception. I'm not saying I've got it all figured out. We all make mistakes and we all do things that aren't 100% in our best interests. It's not about being perfect. It's just about adding in that extra step in thinking about how you make your judgments and your decisions in your own life.
It slows things down. I think it cuts through a lot of that noise, because I think, and just from people that I've spoken to and friends and family, and even myself, you get swept up in just the day-to-day, and especially now because things move so quickly. We've got everything at our fingertips, where there's that instant gratification of everything that we do, good or bad, and it's just really hard to sort of have that moment where you can just stop and have that awareness of what's going on around you. And so when you're able to ask, and this is one thing that I'm always trying to work on myself, is asking better questions. And what better question, like you've just said, as an example of asking that person about, would you allow your 3-year-old or a 3-year-old to smoke? And it just instantly cuts through all of the noise.
All the noise.
Yeah, absolutely. And suddenly it's like, wow. And suddenly you're looking at something from a completely different angle that you would never, if someone on the other side, you could just turn around and say, well, why are you smoking? You're damaging your health. And someone's like, well, I've heard that a million times already. But to ask it in a different way certainly gives a level of awareness that wasn't there before.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned questions, because one of the main things that Sensei Benny used to ask me was why. Mm. Why do you do that? Say that? Why do you think that? Why do you move that way? And most of the time in that hierarchical relationship where you have someone who's directing you, so either instructing you, managing you, etc., you just do what you're told. That's the agreement. You ask me to do something, I do it the way you ask me to do it. But often you're not, especially in martial arts, you're not meant to question the teacher. You're not meant to turn around and say, yeah, but why do you want me to do it like that? But it was almost a role reversal where he would say, why are you doing things that way? Explain it back to me. So he wasn't just looking for me to memorize and copy and mimic. He was looking for me to actually be able to explain why I was doing the things physically I was doing. But that went over into what we call internal training, which is the mental and emotional aspect of our training, which carried over into life. Why do you feel that way? Why do you speak that way about yourself? And when someone that you respect asks you to explain yourself, it forces you to challenge your beliefs. It was shocking. No one had ever asked me a lot of those things before.
I was just going to say, like, it would have been so confronting and uncomfortable to begin with, because you wouldn't have been used to that.
Oh, very much so, especially because I was in my early 20s when I started training when I started training with him. So I look at some of the people that I train now, whether it's physically or mindset coaching, and I just look at them and think, wow, you're still learning so much about yourself. You're brand new in the world, you know. Here's me. It's my birthday in a few weeks. I'm about to turn 43, so I'm feeling a little bit older and wiser. But you know, I'm watching my cousin right now. He's about to go into his first bodybuilding competition. He's 22, and I'm asking him some mindset questions in his final weeks of preparation to get him ready. And no one's ever asked him things like this before. It's really interesting to watch.
When you first met Sensei Benny, even at that stage, you'd gone through so much. You know, even if the book ended prior to meeting him, I think you'd have a really, really interesting story to tell, just on all those experiences leading up to that moment alone.
Thank you.
Was that a struggle? And it's sort of an extension of the last question. Was it a struggle, I guess, going into that environment, and I guess maybe your expectations around what you expected, you know, a martial arts environment to be like, and obviously the physical demands, but obviously, you know, walking into this, I guess, mental maze of challenges after you've just been through so much yourself leading up to that point?
I think the fact that I'd been through a few things, as we all have, just made me hungry for more. I wanted to learn, I wanted to grow, I wanted to change, and I like to be around people in my life now who are the same way. Instead of just taking those experiences that we all go through and not learning and growing from them, it made me more hungry to find somebody who could help me grow more, help me grow faster, help me make sense of what I've been through, instead of just, you know, walking away feeling a bit confused and confounded by it all.
One of the things that I found really interesting in the book was how the approach of each of these topics came up along the way. Each of these hurdles that you were faced against and had to sort of climb over these, and most of them were mental. Majority of it was mental by the looks of it. Obviously there's a lot of physical challenges, but in order to be able to achieve and get past those things was a big mental game. But Sensei Benny, one of the things I think you really sort of articulated and struggled with was that lack of, and I'm going to get the word wrong, but that lack of praise at certain points along the way, where there wasn't the pat on the back, and something that you were really sort of hungry for, and just that acknowledgement that you're on the right path and you're doing good things, but not quite getting it from him. And one thing that I've sort of learnt along the way is really sort of understanding yourself and finding the praise within. And I guess it sort of ties into everything that we've spoken about so far. What did you learn from that experience of not getting that sort of instant acknowledgement or praise from Sensei Benny?
That it hurts. It's hard. You know, I really thought about whether or not to include that in the book, because it makes me feel very vulnerable and exposed to talk about, because no one wants to be perceived as a desperado. Yep. And, you know, I was very young, and I was in a room with somebody who was a legend. So if you could imagine, you know, if you like the All Blacks, you're in a room with Richie McCaw teaching you how to throw a footy, you know, or you like to play guitar and you're in there with Eric Clapton. Like, I was in a room with a man who was very, very famous and I really respected. And, you know, then I was meant to be learning from him. And he was teaching me, but he wouldn't always say good job, or you're doing it right, or well done, or good effort. None of those things that we get used to in those situations. And the thing that really got me was because I was so exposed. You know, I was so exposed in that I was really putting myself out there. I was really trying my best. And any time that we do that, I think it's pretty natural to want a little smile or a nod or a high five from someone, or direct praise. Especially when it's a creative pursuit. I think it can be, it can be a little bit scary. And martial arts is a creative pursuit. You're adding your own colours to something. And it's very exposing. You know, you don't always win in those situations. You don't always come out on top. So there's an element of vulnerability to it that people might not be aware of. But it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy being around, a hard taskmaster who for an extended period of time, didn't let me know that I was good enough, that I was doing it right, which was part of the mind game, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. And do you think that after, all the years have passed now since these particular situations, you experienced these situations with him, do you think that was, what's the best way of wording this? Do you think that it was all beneficial for you, or do you think that even in certain circumstances that it was just a little bit too extreme and there could have still been a little bit of a nod or a wink or something like that just to give you something to keep going? Or do you think that it was actually, I mean, there's obviously a method to the madness, but do you think that there was in certain circumstances that he could have just given you a little bit to work with?
So let me say two things. He was very kind to me along the way. It's not like he was mean to me all the time.
Yeah, of course.
But also my memory of it, I've factored in that my memory of it is probably selective. In that when I'd done something and I would hope that it was enough. I remember one day saying to him, are you happy with me, like where I'm up to in your style of martial arts? I've gone away, I've practiced this thing for a year, I've come back. Are you happy with what I've shown you? Like I had to ask him directly because I was dying here. I needed to know, am I doing it right? Or did I just waste a year? And, in those moments, I knew what I would have liked him to say. And when he didn't say that, my mind naturally focused on what he didn't say as opposed to anchoring to what he did say. Does that make sense? So I was more focused on what I didn't get than maybe he did say something that was, encouraging. It's not like he was horrible to me or anything, but, he wasn't giving me the thing that he knew I wanted, which was very direct praise, acknowledgement. You can relax now. You're good enough. You're doing it well. You're at this level in my eyes. Because when you know that you're in a room with somebody who is truly elite level at anything, you stand differently. You have a different position as opposed to being in a room full of people where you know where you stand. And that's often what happens, in say a fight gym, where all the different people know where they stand. There's a natural pecking order, which is often resolved in the ring. You think you're better than me? We'll get in the ring and find out. So, I was quite used to being, of a, how do I say this without sounding, I knew where I stood in most of the rooms that I was in, and I was experienced enough, and I had a natural bit of talent for this thing that I was doing, where I knew that I wasn't terrible at it. But then you go and swim in deeper water with bigger sharks and you realize, oh, I don't stand where I normally stand. And then you're in the room with the biggest shark there is. How much of a guppy do you think I am? How little am I to you? So it displaced me in that context. And then the more that he knew I wanted to know where I stood, the more he just let me figure it out for myself. So his intention was never to be unkind to me. His intention as a leader and as a very good teacher, he knew that I couldn't value my skill set and my self-worth on his opinion, on what he told me I was. He knew he would rather let me sit there for years on end not knowing and figuring out for myself where I stood. And in that sense, I'm incredibly grateful to him because he cared enough about me to force me to grow. And I had to really trust his intentions. And he proved to me on so many different levels that he was a deeply thoughtful, he had a lot of integrity. And he was a very good teacher. And I saw that reflected in the other students around him. So I did have to have a lot of faith and trust in him and trusting in his intentions. He wasn't being mean. He was just being a very thoughtful teacher. And he told me later, the more specific I got, well, do you think I'm good enough? He would turn around and say, well, what do you think? Yeah. And I'd be like, no, just tell me what you think. And he would always turn it back around. Well, what do you think?
Don't answer my question with a question.
Yeah, and it became almost a game. It was like cat and mouse for years where he just wouldn't tell me. He wouldn't give me the thing that he knew I wanted because, I needed somebody who was stronger than me. I needed somebody who was a powerful presence in my life. I needed somebody who would make me feel less confident than I felt, because in so many situations, especially, you know, as a woman, I felt like, you know, I did feel confident. I did feel strong. I did feel like I had something in my life that I loved to do and I was passionate about. And, you know, I had a lot of positive feedback coming to me in a lot of different contexts. And he became the person whose feedback I really wanted, who they just wouldn't give it. Mm. But don't get me wrong, he's given me more than enough praise over the years. And it's not even so much praise. You're right. It's the wrong word. It's more like it's more just like honest affirmation and honest evaluation, as opposed to, I didn't want him to pat me on the head and say, "Great job, kid." I wanted him to tell me what he thought, honestly, instead of pumping me up. I didn't want him to pump me up. Mm. You know, and often, unfortunately, in dynamics in society, people want you to like them, so they will compliment you. They'll tell you nice things, which is lovely, but you don't always need that from someone. I needed one person in my life who was completely different, who would tell me the truth. You know what? You're great at this, but that and that you need to go and work on.
I think that's a big thing. Sorry.
That's hard to find. Yeah, that's hard to find.
It's, I mean, a very sort of loose comparison, but it sort of ties into a lot of, in more general terms, which is everyday life these days. And, you know, people looking, it's the intention behind it, and people looking for that acknowledgement from other people. And, you know, if someone picks up an idea or a project or something that they want to do that they're really passionate about, I think people are looking for, they're looking for the end goal straight away. They're looking for the podium. They're looking for the end, the finish line. They're looking for the trophies, the awards, everything, the acknowledgement from everybody, and that praise, that word praise. And everything in between becomes this disgusting struggle. And so a lot of people, if they're not getting that pat on the back along the way and the little sort of hits of acknowledgement, then people don't actually get to their outcome. And they give up along the way. And it sort of extends into things such as social media and all the notifications and the things that we get, where we're just so fixated on getting things really quickly and trying to get the validation from other people, when a lot of that validation needs to come from within, and you need to find that drive yourself and that satisfaction in what you're doing in that sort of dirty parts of that journey. And everything else is just a bonus afterwards. But I think it's almost like people are doing things with the intent. Not, I shouldn't say just people in general, but there are many people out there that embark on things because they are looking for that acknowledgement from other people, and it usually leaves people high and dry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's not like we don't ever post a picture on Instagram and, you know, you're happy when people like it. I think it's a very natural human process. But it's also human nature to want reward and to want validation and acknowledgement. And I think, you know, a great example is how coloured belts came into martial arts. I don't know if you know anything about this, but most people know that in martial arts you get a black belt when you are at a level of proficiency. You start at white belt, which is a blank slate. Your first day, you're a beginner. And then throughout the journey to black belt, there's a number of different coloured belts. This was brought in to Western society. So in the traditional days, in, say, Japan and Okinawa in martial arts, they didn't have coloured belts. You started at white belt, and eventually you would have trained so long, your belt turns black. So it was white belt and black belt. And all those years along the way, you didn't get the validation, reward, acknowledgement that you were learning. And then when martial arts were brought more to the Western parts of the world, well, we like a little bit different over here. You know, we want a blue belt and a green belt and a brown belt, so that I know how far along I am, and so I know in a room full of people where I stand. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's very normal and it's motivational. It keeps you going. Or now I know I'm blue belt, I'm going to go green belt next. You know, and all the other white belts, they can see, well, I'm better than all these people and I'm not as good as those ones. You know, it creates a simple ranking system, but it's also the ranking system is based on acknowledgement and validation. So, and having said that, every single belt I ever got, I was stoked. I'm not immune to this. But, you I like even that in Sensei Benny's martial arts system, he asks a level of maturity of people that you don't always see. So we've got the belts that we go along, but say you go from white belt to yellow belt, there are 2 levels at yellow belt in Yukido-kan, is his martial arts system. The first level of it, you get a brand new shiny yellow belt. The second level, when you do a grading test and you move up to a higher grade, you get no stripe on the end of your belt, no acknowledgement. And in a lot of styles, you get 1 stripe, 2 stripe, 3 stripes, so you know where you stand. All you get in his system for that next level up of yellow belt is some new information.
I love it.
And that requires maturity, because then the guy beside you on either side, maybe they don't know what level you are, but you know what level you are. So he keeps it in there. So we'd all like a stripe on our belt. Everybody wants the reward or the likes from everybody or the promotion at work or whatever that validation is. But there comes a time when I think, the maturity that we have, everybody knows that you shouldn't seek validation from outside sources. Intellectually, we all know that, but we all do it. But there comes a certain point where that kind of acknowledgement has to be intrinsic. It has to be within you. And it's based on what you know about yourself, your level of knowledge, what you believe you deserve. And that's the deeper level. And I think that's part of maturing. As a person, I look back at my little self when I was 23 years old in front of Sensei Benny, hoping he would tell me, what I did was correct. And I sort of smile and think, oh, boy, was it, he would say to me, is it correct? And I'd be like, I don't know. And he's like, is it correct or not? Is that what I showed you? And he would force me to say out loud, yes or no. He'd force me to do it. And that's where I had to start to make up my own mind instead of always doubting myself or doubting. I wasn't someone who particularly doubted themselves, but when someone really put pressure on, did you do it right or not? Can you say it out loud or not? And it forced me to say, that was correct. And he'd be like, great. And we'd move on straight away to the next thing without him ever going, yes, it was correct. Oh, it was a long road, but it's a good thing when someone teaches you that what you think matters. Because we base our whole lives on what we believe about ourselves. And this is what I go in, I'm so lucky I get to go and do corporate speaking now and motivational speaking. And I so often get brought in to speak about this message, which is, the way that you are who you say you are. You are what you believe about yourself. And so often we miss opportunities in our professional lives, in our personal lives, because we have a private moment with minds of self-doubt, which creates hesitation, and then we miss an opportunity.
It's I see that all the time in myself, where it's that imposter syndrome coming in, where you're not quite 100%. You haven't had that feedback, or you don't have the courage to seek out that feedback from other people, but also just to be able to verbalize it and make it a reality. And I think it's that denial aspect where, the thought comes into your head very quickly, but you quickly search for something else to distract you from that thought and get on with your day or get on with doing something else. And it becomes this underlying stress and this thing that's just not addressed. And it becomes something that for a lot of people becomes regret. And as the years roll on, it festers and gets worse and worse. So then you have these missed opportunities and things that you suddenly, I wish I did that and I never did. I should have done it, but I didn't. And so they're just things that eat away at people. And for some, it can be absolutely catastrophic. But it's, even for me, just things that I do, as soon as I verbalize something to myself, and sometimes I'll be sitting in a car for a couple of hours and I'm talking to myself as I'm driving along, and I just, as I'm verbalizing things, I get this chill that goes through my body, and I realize, oh my God, I've really put myself on the spot here. No one else is listening. But the fact that I've actually just verbalized it instead of just letting the thought bounce around within my skull, I've suddenly almost I've made myself accountable by making it verbal. And that's a really uncomfortable thing to do, but it can also be really liberating.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, this is the truth that we don't often share with other people, is the thought process that we have. I should have said that yesterday, but I didn't. Now I'm kicking myself. well, next time I see that person, I'm going to speak up, or next time I'm in that meeting, I'm going to share my idea, even if it gets shot down. That kind of thing happens to all of us at regular intervals, but we don't sit around and tell our friends necessarily. It's not like I sit down with my boss next time I see them and go, in that meeting last week, I really should have said this, and blah, blah, blah. You don't lay it out on the table necessarily. So often these things happen within us, and, I might not speak up in that meeting for an entire year, even though I'm telling myself I should, because if I really share my idea and it gets shut down, maybe that'll affect my promotion. Maybe, they won't see me the same. Maybe they'll blast me out of the room. All of those things that happen. And when you verbalize it, I'm aware of myself when I say it, it makes it sound like you're full of self-doubt and you have low self-esteem. But that's not even the case. I'm sure, people like Richard Branson of Virgin, he has self-doubt. He's missed opportunities. He's failed to speak up. There's, everybody does this process. We just don't often unpack it. And, when people sort of doubt me with this stuff, I get to go in to speak at really high-flying corporate companies sometimes, and they say, well, I don't feel like that. It's always the peacock in the room, the guy who puts his hand up like, maybe some places they act like that. But, the proof's in the pudding. I always say to people, if we didn't all feel like that, we would all be married to supermodels. We would have all reached every single goal we ever had. We'd all be financially, millionaires, because we're all so amazing and act on every single opportunity without any doubt or hesitation. There's this part of all of us that questions, what can I do? What am I worth? Who am I? And I think everybody has that moment at some stage in their life where they, especially when they're young and they have a bit more self-doubt and they see somebody across a bar and they think, oh, I'd like to go and talk to Brad Pitt or Giselle or whoever it is for you, and I say, well, would you do that? Would you really do that and risk getting shot down, or would you let that opportunity pass you by? And we've all done that on some level, on some level. You never went for that job, or you never tried Zumba or breakdancing or whatever the thing is that you wanted to do. And I think, we get to a certain point in life where, for me, it started to happen in my mid-30s, where I started to go, oh, hang on, if I don't do some things in the next 10 years, it might be too late because circumstances change. So I started to wonder about the opportunities I'd missed, and I started to feel the clock ticking in a way that I didn't feel when I was 25. And then things for me happened to change in a very specific way. I ended up getting cancer when I was 37, and I all of a sudden saw a gigantic clock on the wall ticking, and it really woke me up to the idea that sometimes it's too late. Sometimes you really do miss opportunities, and intellectually we all understand that our lives have a limited time span. They're finite. We don't live forever. And as we get older, our bodies change, which limits our ability to do physical things. We all understand that intellectually, but most people don't live like that's the truth. The ones who do seem very awake. Even to me, I think, wow, that person's very, very connected to their own mortality and the fact that they really need to live life passionately and intensely now. And that's why I think I'm really passionate about this idea of backing yourself and being really aware of the way that you speak to yourself with that inner dialogue, so that you can reach out and share your idea. You can speak up. You can go ask that person out. You can go apply for that job or try that thing that you've always wanted to try in your, as a hobby, so that you don't miss your opportunities before it's too late. I just want people to have big lives.
The name of the book just ties into everything you just said, like the 10 seconds of courage. And when you've explained it, it's such a simple concept. But like anything, it might be simple in nature as far as the steps, and there's no complexity to it, but it doesn't make it easy. And I think half the challenge that, well, at least from my own experiences, is to get to that point of having that moment or those 10 seconds, is being able to have the awareness in the moment to acknowledge what is happening and what's going through your head, to be able to then make a decision as far as those next actions. Because a lot of the time we're so fearful and we get swept up in what's going on, and it's uncomfortable, and all the the self-talk, the imposter syndrome kicks in, all these different things that hold us back.
Yeah.
But it's almost autopilot. It's so quick and instantaneous, and a lot of that has to come, like, there has to be an ability that people need to sort of work on to be able to stop just for a slight moment, to be able to think, this is something that I'm feeling, I'm acknowledging these feelings, and now I need to make a decision as to what I do. And that's just, I mean, I assume that comes from practice, and I've certainly found myself stopping a lot more in more recent years than I have in the past. But it's just, I think it's a never-ending challenge.
Absolutely. It's something that happens to all of us every day, and it's so hard to get people to have an understanding of it because, like you said, it happens so quickly and we overlook it unless you start to catch yourself out being a chicken. Because we're all chickens about all kinds of things. What scares me probably doesn't scare you. And you can see it in social situations. Some people are super comfortable, and there are other people, who it's a really big deal for them to smile at the person beside them and introduce themselves. It's not about going bungee jumping. Like, bungee jumping scares me. Everybody's afraid of different things in small ways and in catastrophic, life-changing ways. We all have different fears. But once you start to catch yourself out when you are having that moment of fear that requires some courage, you start to see it clearly for what it is. And fear is a dirty word. Fear is a big, scary word. People don't like to talk about fear. And it's almost one of those things, well, I'm not scared, but we're all scared. We're all scared of something. And once you admit it, it becomes less powerful. And Sensei Benny would explain this to me in the context of being in the dressing room before a fight. You're about to walk out and have a kickboxing match. And that logically is a scary thing to do. I don't know if you've ever gotten into a fist fight at school, Andy, but
there may have been some. There may have been one occasion.
Hey, there you go. It's a scary thing. It's an irrational thing to do to put yourself in a situation where you might be physically harmed.
Yeah.
So it's logical to be afraid of that, but because it's a sport and societally men are super inclined to admit they're afraid, as a general rule. Sensei Benny would take me into the dressing room and he'd be like, look at all these people pretending they're not scared. And he said, are you afraid? And I had to say, well, yeah, I'm scared I'm going to end up in the hospital tonight when I fight. And he'd say, good, if you can admit it out loud to me, don't go announce it to everyone. They don't need to know. He said, but if you can just admit it to me and to yourself, then you break the power of it. But if you're spending all of your energy, and I could see, some of these guys that had mohawks and, heaps of tattoos and big muscles and, and they're walking around like they're a caged animal about to kill someone. And their eyes are bulging out of their head. And he said, well, you think he's really feeling? And it was so interesting because he's, this Sensei Benny's this incredibly well, highly regarded, massively awarded fighter. And he said, everybody has a little fear. Some people have a lot of fear and that's where they fight from. He said, most people fight from fear or anger. But it's a really big deal for so many people to admit that they have fear, and then it controls them. They can't even see it themselves. They can't even speak it. They think that they're King Kong, but they're so afraid often that they're going to lose, that they're going to be humiliated, that they won't do their best, that something will happen. He said those are the ones that come back in the dressing room and they cry like babies. And you would see it every time. Guys would lose and they would come back into the dressing room and absolutely be distraught because they hadn't made peace with the outcome. They hadn't made peace with their fear. And when their worst fear happened to them, they didn't know what to do. They couldn't hide it anymore, if that makes sense. It just comes out. So, he said, you watch. This guy will come in. If he doesn't lose, he'll be incredibly emotional. And he would point at someone else and he'd say, if he doesn't win, you watch what happens. And usually what would happen, the guy who was much more calmer and settled in himself and not trying to act like he wasn't scared, he would be the one who came back into the dressing room. And if he didn't win, he'd be the guy who's like, oh, well, I put in my best effort and, good luck to the other guy. He was better on the day. A much different response because he knew he was afraid and he wasn't pretending he wasn't. A very different experience. So I try and make that the same thing on a smaller scale. If something makes me nervous, I'll admit it.
I think one of the big things is that, and it sort of falls into everyday life where if you're putting so much energy and focus into pushing feelings away, and fear being one of those big ones, then you sort of just lose that control and focus. Like you lose that self-control, and that's why people just lose it and they just crumble after the fact, or even in the midst of in this case, fighting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's it's a difficult thing. Whatever Benny used to say to me, whatever you run away from, you run into. So whatever you pretend you're not feeling, eventually you'll be forced to feel it. And I knew that was super true. So it counts for fear, but it counts for so many other things as well. It comes back to our belief system and the way we think, and what you don't confront, eventually you'll have to confront. Whether that's just within yourself emotionally or in an actual situation in your life, be it work, sport, your relationships, your family, whatever it is. So that's a bit of a tricky one, but it's definitely true.
I think a lot of the things that you've experienced along the way, and if you sort of go back to sort of your early teens and all the adversity that you're going through then, leaving home and all those experiences, and then going through you've got a book, so each literal chapter, but the chapters of your life where you've had to just experience these new things along the way, where you've had to learn more about yourself. And no doubt if you, as somebody in their early teens, looked at where you are now, or several chapters in your life ahead, then you would expect you couldn't see the connection. And so I think a big thing with a lot of this stuff is that there's not just one answer. There's not just one way to get to that end point, to be able to be confident, be able to have courage, be able to have self-awareness and perspective. There's a lot of self-work there that takes a long time, and it's sort of incremental along the way. So I think that's a big thing that I took out of the book as far as patience, because you can't always see that far ahead, and I think you really need to focus on the day ahead rather than years down the track, because sometimes goals seem so lofty and hard to attain. But having the patience to be able to just deal with what's in front of you and have that self work and really sort of work on yourself, it gets you into a position where you realize, and you can look back later on and you think, geez, like I would have had no idea how I've achieved all these things. But at that starting point, it's just so unattainable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always think of, there's a Navy SEAL saying, which is you eat an elephant one bite at a time.
Yeah.
And I think that's so true. When we're working towards something, sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees. And I always think about challenging stuff as well. When you're going through a challenge, often, what we focus on is the problem, whether it's, a small thing at work today or, something really big that's happened in our lives. It's so natural to focus on the problem and not have that foresight to look ahead and go, I know in a year's time I'm really going to know so much more about my character from this experience.
Yeah.
But it's all in how you perceive it. And I'm sure, all of your listeners have had something in their lives where when it was happening to them, it wasn't much fun, but later on they were grateful for it because they really found that it taught them something. And I guess the honor I had in writing a book was to be able to point at all those things and tie them all together. And I linked it, to what I'd learned from Sensei Benny and all the challenges that he gave me, that, I could create this, this line of experiences and learnings through my life that did end up culminating in some big experiences for me, and some big tests in the last 5 years that I was really sort of forced to put my money where my mouth was and see what I could create, both in a good way, professionally and competitively, but also in a challenging way. Like, what do you do when the worst thing that's ever happened to you happens? And for me, that was getting Hodgkin's lymphoma and cancer. And what do you do in that situation? Do you let it break you, or is that going to be the thing that really makes you in the end?
And no doubt, writing that book, there would have been a lot of things, because the way you put it together is, it's very clear and concise, in the sense that when I read it and I'm going through it, I can I can see I can see that line. I can see the line of your life, but I can also see the parallels of things that I've experienced along the way in different settings. But I can see the connections. But when you're compiling this book and you're having this reflective period of time where you're going back and digging into your past, was it a case that you sort of it's not the right term, but did you sort of take certain things for granted along the way, that you only really sort of got that clarity as you were writing the book and realized that there was a lot of lessons here and things that were sort of in autopilot for you, because they were just things that you had to deal with along the way, but it was only upon reflection that they became far clearer?
Yeah, I mean, definitely on reflection. And I'd had a period of time, I was having treatment for 6 months. I'd had 4 months of chemo and some radiation afterwards. And then I spent a year sort of getting over it, I guess, and recovering, where I was very much still affected by my treatment. So my life really slowed down for a good period of time. So I had a lot more time to reflect. And, you see things differently when you have just been through something really hard. So my positive outlook that I had very actively created over the years was suddenly gone. I was on some pretty shaky ground there for a while, so I was seeing things differently, and I really did have to look for the meaning and the lessons in what I'd been through in order to find a way to move forward. And you see people get knocked down all the time. People lose jobs, or they get divorced, or, they have a health scare. Like, really rough stuff happens to people. And, I know in the world today, something way worse will happen to millions of people than what's ever happened to me. But, we all get knocked down. And I think that I was lucky that I'd spent years learning a bunch of lessons that I could use to get back up. And luckily I had a teacher in Sensei Benny where he would literally say to me, go and write down what I just said. I'd be like, huh? But he literally made me bring a notepad with me when we would train. And it wasn't just write down what I've said in sounds so arrogant, but he'd like, that's the lesson of what we did today. That's the lesson. Change your thinking. Go and write it down. So I would go and write down, change your thinking. And he made me do this for years. He would tell me what to write down. But he would also do it, when he asked me questions, why did you just say that? Why did you do that? And I would answer him, and he said, perfect, write it down. That was your truth. Go and write it down. So he would make me, I guess, physically act on the things that happened intellectually, and he would get me to really acknowledge the core pieces of information that we were coming up with as we were studying the physical aspect of martial arts and studying the internal training, the mental and emotional aspect of it. So what I ended up with was like a PhD on top of my PhD, like 20 years worth of notebook learning from someone who is a living martial arts master. So when I went to write a book for myself, I literally had all of the notes already there because he had the foresight to tell me to write it down and to not forget the experiences and the learning that we were going through. So when I needed it, I had a resource there to be able to help myself get back up. And, and it really made me feel grateful when I did go through being so ill, where it took away everything that made me me. So I couldn't go and do martial arts. I couldn't go and run my business. I'd been self-employed for a decade, and, I couldn't go and do that. And I couldn't, interact in the world in a confident way anymore because I felt so vulnerable. It really destabilized me. So all of the stuff that I didn't even realize I was relying on to make me me was gone. And I really had to find a way to get back up. And I was very lucky that I got an opportunity to do a speech at the Sydney Opera House for TEDx. Someone roped me into it. I'd never done any public speaking before, and I got this amazing opportunity. And that was only 1 year after I'd been sick, so I was still pretty shaky. And it was every part of me wanted to say no, but this is the 10 seconds of courage. This is the moment where it's easier to say no to something and let an opportunity pass you by. But I knew that they were desperate times for me, and if I didn't start to say yes and get back up, I was going to be doomed to feel how I felt forever. And that wasn't an option. So I said yes to something pretty crazy, and I'm so grateful I did. I'm so grateful I'd had somebody like Sensei Benny teach me all those years, 10 seconds of courage, you can change your life. You can turn on a dime and change your life in an instant if you just have the courage to say yes to something. If you just back yourself in those moments where it's easier not to. And the next thing I knew, I'd said yes to doing a speech, and then I'd said yes to a whole lot of other things, and and I did that speech, and it literally changed my life. My life's never been the same since that day, in a good way.
That's the big sort of turning. You've had a whole heap of turning points along the way throughout your life, but that's a really interesting one as far as a lot of your journey sort of getting up to that point. And once again, I'm probably not going to word it the right way, but it's been about you as far as becoming the best person that you possibly can, but taking care of yourself, learning about yourself, finding out about everything about you that, sometimes you don't have that awareness or don't appreciate or don't have that self-love that we spoke about before. But you're in a position now where after this experience of doing TEDx, that everything's sort of been spun the other way, where you've learnt all these things, you've built up this experience and all these different teachings along the way, and you're able to share that out with other people and pass on what you've been through to other people. And that obviously the book's there, and that's been a result of a lot of this, but doing a lot of your public speaking now, which no doubt from what you said before, getting the first offer to go and speak at the Opera House, you probably never thought that you'd become a public speaker as a job, but it's incredible that you've been able to turn it around like a 180. Now you're giving out to everybody.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I didn't actually know that there were professional speakers who went and spoke at conferences and things, because I'd never worked in the corporate world. So I didn't know that was something you could go and be and get paid for. So I didn't go into TEDx with any kind of agenda or intention to become a professional speaker. And, oddly enough, it was actually one of my students, who is one of my friends named Jess Miller. She had said to me when I was recovering, have you been doing like things to inspire yourself? And, do you like TEDx talks or TED Talks? And I was like, yeah, I love those. My favorite TED Talks by a woman named Brene Brown. And, I'd found so much inspiration from things like that. And she just said to me, would you ever do one? And I sort of laughed, and I was like, oh, this was over coffee one day. And I was like, oh, yeah, I suppose, if I've got the opportunity, I'd have to say yes. But I couldn't ever imagine it being a realistic thing. Yeah. What I didn't know about Jess, because we'd always spent so much time training and talking about deeper things, was that she, in her daily life, was involved in the organising committee for TEDx Sydney, which is the biggest TED event outside of the actual big TED in North America. So I didn't know that about her, and she was asking me would I ever consider doing a speech, because she wanted to nominate me to speak.
Sneaky.
And I never would have put myself forward for it. I didn't think of myself as somebody who, you should listen to me. I never thought of that. But she knew that there would be a crossover in what I'd learned from Sensei Benny and how I was talking about these things to her about martial arts into the corporate world or into people's personal lives. And, I didn't think that my story would be interesting to anyone outside of, people who did kickboxing. Yeah. But she did. She could see it. So, she nominated me. And what I found out that day when I did that speech was that what I was speaking about was truth to a lot of people, not just martial arts people. And there was a crossover appeal that people could relate to what I was saying about, the bigger concepts about not self-doubt in the boxing ring, but maybe self-doubt just in daily life. And, and I'm very grateful to her. She had the wisdom to see that in a way that I couldn't see it. And she provided me with a life-changing opportunity. And all I had to do was just have that moment of courage to say yes when she told me what the actual plan was. It was pretty wild, and they ended up making me the closing speaker for that day, and they took a big chance on me, and I was like, are you sure? Like, I've never done this before. And I didn't know what was going to happen. I'd never done any speaking. I thought I might get up there and freeze. Luckily, I didn't. And, I had still had a thing called chemo brain, which is chemotherapy gives you memory loss. So there was a very good chance that I was going to get up there and forget what I was talking about, because I was at the point where I would forget your name, even though I've known you for 20 years, and what's your name again? And you're right in front of me. It was a very weird sensation. So I went on stage that day knowing there's a really good chance I'm going to blow this, but I've got to do it anyway, because if I don't do it, I have to live with that regret. Like I was going to be somewhere on that Wednesday, and it could have been at home watching Netflix, or it could have been on stage putting myself out there. And I didn't want to be on my deathbed one day going, damn, why didn't I do that thing? Like, what a shame. Even though it was probably the worst time of my life to do it, I knew that I had to do it in order to change something, because if you don't change anything, you don't do something, nothing happens.
Well, it's almost like the pain of going through that experience of being uncomfortable and pushing yourself is less painful than the feeling of regret of not doing it, because you're sort of dealing with a short term period of being uncomfortable and experiencing pain. But really, I mean, there's so much more long-term pain that you would have to deal with. But we're sort of programmed to just think short-term all the time.
Absolutely. We don't think about the long-term effects of what we do. And I guess having been, sort of staring my mortality in the face at 37 years old when I got diagnosed, I was thinking about all the places I hadn't been yet. And it wasn't that I'd never traveled. It was more like, I was going to go there on my honeymoon. Why haven't I gone yet? That kind of thing, like just putting things off till later. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh no, what if my time's up and I never got to go to that place? I never got to, do those things. It was all of a sudden the regret of not having done things sooner hit me really hard. So I knew moving forward in my life after cancer that I would have to, take the bull by the horns and really not put things off. And I still live by that to this day. I make sure that I don't wait till later to go and do the things that I want to do. I try to do them sooner. And, going into that speech at the Opera House, I knew that I was going to go up and talk about this idea of 10 seconds of courage, because it had literally saved my life when I was having treatment, when I wanted to run away. It gave me moments of courage to face up to the reality of what I had to do. And I felt very lucky for the lessons that I'd learned through martial arts and having someone like Sensei Benny to mentor me in my life. And I knew that not everybody had somebody like that. So I wanted to get up and talk about something that really mattered to me. And that's the message that I shared in my speech. But I knew that the truth underneath that was that I was terrified getting up there. I was really scared. And, they'd asked me originally if I would do a speech and a martial arts demonstration as well. And I had said no because I was scared. I didn't think I could. I was very, very physically vulnerable. And the way that I explain it to people now is I looked fit and healthy on the outside, but I was still so weak from my treatment even a year later that I couldn't open a plastic water bottle. I'd have to ask someone else to open it for me. So, content's different from packaging. That's the way I put it. I looked a lot healthier than I was. So, and it was the same thing for my emotional state. I was trying to be strong, and I was trying to build a new life for myself. But really, I felt pretty shattered and pretty vulnerable. And they'd asked me to do the demonstration, and I thought a speech was enough. That would be hard enough. So I said no, and I managed to write the speech. And they made me the closing speaker. And then it was a week beforehand, and I knew I just had this niggling feeling in my gut, like, how can I get up and give a speech about courage when I'm actually too scared to try to do a martial arts demonstration? And one thing I knew I didn't want to be for the rest of my life moving forward, after I'd been sick, was full of shit, basically. I didn't want to be disingenuous. I didn't want to have any duality in my life. I just wanted to be my true, genuine self and share that with people. I took all my armor off when I was sick. I'd had quite an armored life in a way where I'd often be, the woman in rooms full of men. I'd often be the kickboxer in a room full of people who did yoga. I was always that person who was perceived as like a strong woman in inverted commas, or tough or whatever. And I had to be that in a lot of situations. But, the truth of it is that I'm a bit of a silly sausage, and I'm quite a soft person, really. And I guess when I was sick, I just took all my armor off and I put it down, and I thought, what, that weighs too much. So moving forward, I'm just going to be my genuine self. And there's, I think there's strength in showing your vulnerability and just being real. So I thought, 1 week before TEDx, I decided I'm going to try to do a demonstration. I'm going to try to break a wooden board. And it was something I hadn't done in about 3 years since before I got sick. It was something that I didn't know if I could do anymore. And that kind of represented to me all of the things that I was unsure about in my life moving forward. It was one of those things where, you literally are who you say you are. And I was telling myself at that point underneath that I was never going to be who I used to be. I could never do the things I used to do. And I decided to find out live on stage if I was still somebody who could do some of the things that I used to do and surprise myself. And I thought there's no point going and giving a speech if I don't truly believe in what I'm talking about. And if I'm brave enough, I'm going to be prepared to fail in front of thousands of people. not to prove anything about, being physically strong or to show off in any way. It was a moment for myself that I let other people watch, that I would have had to have done at some stage anyway, privately, just to find out, do I back myself or not? Am I still in control of my destiny or not? And, it was a big moment, and it had a very emotional reaction, both from the audience and then from me, because I could see people, 1 meter away, 2 meters away, bursting into tears and being so involved in what was happening, because it was, it was a real moment in my life. There was no rehearsal. There was no, in the rehearsal, they wanted me to actually break the board, and I said no. Because I knew that, the courage would be to do it and know that there was a chance I could fail, which is, I think we've all had that moment, where you're putting it all on the line, you could fail publicly, and I think that's what creates hesitation in so many of us, is we don't want failing when no one can see. But if we're going to fail when everyone's watching, most people would avoid that like the plague. But I just decided, right, in this moment, I don't care what happens. Even if I fail, good. If I fail, good, then at least I backed myself, because I was at the point where I would rather back myself and not succeed than live another year of my life not trying. So you have to watch the video on YouTube to find out what happened.
That's right. I'll link so people can check it out. It's
excellent.
Those feelings where I find this all the time now, and I almost kick myself and I go, damn it, Andy. It's when you have a thought and an idea in your head and something, and then there's that moment in time where you're sort of at that crossroad where you can actually go ahead and move ahead with that decision, or push it aside because it's too scary or too vulnerable or whatever it might be. But I find myself catching myself out and going, damn it, Andy, it's in your head now. You have zero choice. You have to do it. And it doesn't matter how uncomfortable it is or whatever it is, it's got to a point where it's such an uncomfortable feeling to get to that point of realization that you sort of think, I've got no choice now. Like, I've sort of programmed myself that if I have a thought that, maybe I could do that. And in the past, you may have just quickly sort of pushed it to the side and come up with a bunch of reasons as to these rational reasons why it's not a good idea to take any action. But now I'm finding myself like kicking myself because I'm like, I can't, like, I know that the pain of not going ahead with it and that pain of regret is just so much more than actually going through that uncomfortable moment of taking those next few steps. And obviously that experience that you've just mentioned is sort of on another level, because there is a lot of pressure there. And the pressure of public speaking, for most people, it's one of the biggest fears that most people have. And to do it at such an iconic location with a big crowd, that alone is just, for a lot of people, it would induce vomiting, no doubt. But to then add that martial arts element to it, and putting into context all of your challenges and adversity that you'd been through and where you currently were as well physically, there's just a lot there. But I think the concept is the same no matter what we're doing in life. Is just, you have to get to that point where it's like, well, what's more painful? Is it more painful to take that step forward, or is it more painful to live with the knowledge that you decided not to do it?
Absolutely. And what you just articulated is the decision-making process. So I don't advocate people use 10 seconds of courage to just randomly throw themselves at everything they think of in their lives, because that's dangerous. But that's how I weigh it up. Should I do this or not? Would I regret it on my deathbed if I didn't? Would I regret it at the end of this year when I look back and assess the years that I didn't? And that's how I use the barometer of how much do I need to do this, by the level of regret that it would be there if I didn't. So, it's such an important thing to weigh up. And I guess when I had that opportunity to do TEDx, I was very focused on not living with regrets. And that's where I tied in doing the board break with the difference between a concept, a thought in your mind, and taking the physical action. Because ideas are worth nothing. Ideas are great, they're beautiful, they feel good, but they're not real. So there's a big step in martial arts between the theory and the practical component. And that's why I started competing in kickboxing, was to find out the reality. Can I actually do this? I can do it in the gym in theory when no one's punching me full contact. But when there's a crowd and when I know this person's trying to take my head off, can I do the physical aspect of it for real? So there's a big leap that happens between what's in our heads and what we actually manifest into our lives in physical action. And that's why I did the board break at TEDx, because I wanted to not just get up and talk about that, but I wanted to physically demonstrate it, just like I would in a martial arts school. There has to be a point where you put your money where your mouth is. There has to be a point where you take the action outside of your mind to do something, whether it's I pick up the phone today and call that person, I sit down and have a coffee and I say the thing I need to say, I sign up for something, whatever it is, the physical action is what creates the reality of it. And that's the step that is the hardest. The first step to make it real, once it comes outside of your head, is usually the hardest step, because once you've taken the first step, then you're doing it. And I guess the same is true for, I use the example of, when you're going out to have a kickboxing fight, people think, I say to people, would you ever do that? Would you ever get up in the ring and fight someone? And most people are sensible and say no, But, I say, what do you think would be the scariest part? And they say, getting hit. Mm. And Sensei Benny explained to me long before I actually ever competed in the ring, he said, most people think it's the physical pain of it that is the thing to be afraid of. He said the absolute hardest moment, the moment that takes the most courage, is when you're standing in the dressing room, they call your name and your music starts and everyone looks at you and you have to take that first step out of the safety of the dressing room into the moment. He said that's the moment where people run. That's the moment where people fold in on themselves and start to doubt themselves. And he talked about 10 seconds of courage that way. If you can have 10 seconds of the guts to walk from the dressing room up into the ring, then you're already doing the thing. You've started. But that's the point that people hesitate, and it's the moment we overlook. It's the starting that really takes courage. It's the starting where you go, like, okay, I'm going to do it now, I'm going to do it, and I'm doing it. It's that bit that is really the brave bit, because once you do most things, you're already doing it. It's okay.
My heart's racing just visualizing that moment. Just the anticipation. I mean, I guess I'm exactly like one of those people that you mentioned before when that question pops up about, being in a fight, professional fight, and what would be the scariest thing. And for me, I've got a lot of friends that do mixed martial arts and lots of different things that are quite physical. And for me, the biggest thing that holds me back from ever considering anything like that is that physical aspect of getting hit. But for me,
and that's sensible though.
Yeah,
that's sensible. You shouldn't want to get hit in the face. It's no fun and it hurts. But we're conditioned to think that fear makes us weak.
That's right.
We're conditioned to think that fear means you shouldn't do something. But what Sensei Benny was trying to get me, and that's the story I was telling you before about the guys in the dressing room pretending they're not scared. Mm. Fear doesn't make you weak. In many situations, when you're putting yourself out there and taking a risk, whether it's physical, financial, etc., you're meant to be a bit afraid.
Yeah, that's right.
That's very normal, but we read that and interpret that within us as, maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I shouldn't go through with it. Maybe that means that I'm weak and it's not for me just because I feel afraid before I do it. But you can't have courage without fear. When you feel that fear, you have to weigh up, is this right for me? Will I regret not doing it? And make that value judgment for yourself. But I think we misinterpret what fear is, and that's where I'm grateful for having something physical that I've done that taught me literally in a tangible way about my own fear. And I had a teacher point at it and make me admit, yeah, I'm afraid. The first thing he ever said to me was, do you feel fear? So it's been a theme, but he wanted to see if I'd tell the truth.
Yeah.
And I think we don't talk about it enough in our lives, because really it's our fear or a hesitation or a doubts that really dictate what happens in our lives. And everyone's going to get to the end of their life. Everyone's going to have a story that they've written for themselves about what they did, what they achieved, who they were, who they loved, where they lived, all of those things. And if you're one of those people, like most of us, who limits themselves, limits their possibilities because their fear dictates what they should try, then you'll live a very specific life. But if you have that little tools, like something like 10 seconds of courage that you practice and you get better at, and you acknowledge your fear without any shame or judgment, and then move through it into action, then you'll create new possibilities for yourself. And I think it's abundantly clear to me, if I hadn't done that TEDx speech, if I hadn't attempted the board break, And I hadn't done it 1 year after I was sick. At a moment I was still very vulnerable. I wouldn't give the same speech today, but I did it right then at probably the worst moment to have ever done it. That's what sent my life on this massive trajectory. It's amazing now. If I had played it safe, my life wouldn't be like that now. I would have limited my own possibilities. And that terrifies me. That motivates me every day to, to try different things and to really put myself out there, because I don't want to be one of those people who looks back on their life at the end and goes, oh, I only lived it between the 40 and 70% band. I never had the guts to go to 80, 90%. What a shame. Now it's too late.
What at the moment now in your life are you experiencing these types of feelings where you're making those decisions? Is there anything that you're sort of, even on the horizon, or something that you can see coming up as far as a new experience, or are you finding something in day-to-day life that you're having to go through this same framework?
I'm so keenly aware of it because I speak about it so much. It's a blessing and a curse. So I'm all the time. So, even in the last few weeks, I had a wonderful experience. I went to a place named Qualia on Hamilton Island, the Whitsundays, that I'd wanted to go to for 10 years. And I went there on the spur of the moment for my partner's birthday, because I went, you know what? I caught myself out waiting again. I was like, I don't want to wait another 5 years until I can afford to go there. I'm going to go there now. So we went and we had a beautiful time. But the flip side of that is, yesterday I sat down and had 2 different meetings about a business that I want to start. And I'm scared. I'm scared to start it. What if it fails? All those natural things that we go through. And I think I don't need to try that hard. I've already got a great business. But then I go, well, what do you want for your life? Do you want more qualities? Do you want more experiences that, are really out there? Or do you want to just live in that 40 to 70% band? And I know the truth. The truth is, if it's not this business, maybe it's another one, because you want to create possibilities for yourself. And it's not always about seeking more. It's just when I feel that fear come up, or it's easier not to try, I know that I need to investigate more. Doesn't mean I need to do it, but it means I need to keep having a look about what that means, because that's usually where the growth is. When something makes me a bit uncomfortable and itchy feeling, then I go, maybe I need to keep examining this, because when you're in your comfort zone, it's a beautiful place to be. I love my comfort zone. It's so squishy and happy and warm, and it smells like, cinnamon donuts in there. It's all a happy place. But, I kind of go there for a while, and then I know, is there something that's making me itchy that I need to address? Because often the things that have made me itchy and uncomfortable in my life have led to really amazing things. Don't get me wrong, I've failed plenty of times, but the moment you feel there could be some growth in it, that's what I try to go towards and explore, because I want to have big lives. I want the people around me to have big lives and to do things that they care about and to feel good about themselves. And those things I find often come from challenging yourself and growing.
Have you been able to, like, when you're getting these feelings, these flags sort of pop up and you go, I need to investigate this further. Have you been able to sort of reinterpret those feelings as far as, obviously you're feeling uncomfortable and you acknowledging that, and there's an element of fear there and maybe some doubt, but are you also sort of looking at it as, wow, this is actually quite an exciting feeling to have, because as you said, like, there's opportunities here. There's an opportunity. There's a possibility of growth to push myself outside my comfort zone. And are you able to sort of capture some excitement that you can sort of attach to this feeling? It might be a really hard way to explain it, but No, absolutely. I want to be excited in my life. I want to have an exciting year this year where I look back and go, wow, that was cool. I want to, because life's short. I'm in full remission. They tell me I'm going to live to be an old lady, hopefully. But what if I don't? What if I've got 2 years left? I never want to lose that feeling. And I explain this to people sometimes. I said, what if you had a year to live? What would you do? Would you start the business or not? Would you say that thing to that person? Would you walk over there to Brad Pitt and ask him out? It changes the clock that you have in your mind, and it creates a sense of urgency. And I never want to lose that feeling, even though it sounds a little bit morbid. It's a powerful feeling. What would I do if?
And like I said before, it doesn't mean run helter-skelter at everything and make crazy decisions all the time and, you know, spend all your money and all that kind of stuff. But I'm very aware that when I get to the end of every year, I want to look back and go, good job, kid. Like, well done. That was fun. That was exciting. You tried some things. You learned from these failures, but you created these successes. And, you know, I want to be actively engaged in my life when, you know, really it'd be easier to kind of go, oh, well, I've got the rest of my life off. I had cancer. You know, it'd be easier not to try. I'll just be over here with my nice relationship and my nice place that I live with my nice friends and my nice job. You know, there's that part of me definitely that I just want to have a nice life. But I also want to have those feelings of excitement and adventure in my life that come from, well, I don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to give it a try. And I'm very lucky that those moments come up for me where I get opportunities. And, you know, it's as simple as I have to go on a speaking trip tomorrow. I have to travel to a different city, and I know I've got some friends there, and you know, a few of them just got married, and one of the other ones is going through some really hard personal stuff. And it would be so much easier for me to go to that city, do my job, and fly home. But I know that I need to put myself out there to my friends. I need to be there and be actively engaged in their lives, just so we all have a deeper experience in the next 2 days. Because if I die on the plane on the way home, good, I did something, not good I died on the plane on the way home, but good, I did something that made me more connected to my world, made me more connected to other people. Might go out of my comfort zone, but at least I did something. Because I think there's so many of us that are so, you know, we're so happy in our comfort zone. It's easier just to, you know, watch TV and eat a bag of chips and go to work the next day and to see our friends on social media and not really actively participate in life. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with that at times. We all need times like that where you have a bit of time off from everything. But, you know, it comes down to what matters to you and what you want. And I know moving forward, I want to put myself out there. I want to try new things. And I want to be someone who walks around with their armor off and really shares connection with people and, you know, enjoys my life.
It's a powerful thing, and one reoccurring theme that I've certainly found myself talking about on this podcast with other people is that I think regardless of, you know, people's goals and things that they want to do in life, I think everybody, like, sort of at a basic level, a foundation, wants to strive for something, some sort of incremental progress, even if it's a very sort of small scale thing. Or the other thing is also being a contributor, contributing to other people or to something. It's that sort of sense of worth, you know, and that can manifest in a whole range of different ways depending on that person's circumstances. But, you know, you can live a very comfortable life, but if you're not contributing in some way, or you feel like you're contributing and adding value, or you're not striving for something and showing progress, then I think that's when people start to build these feelings of not having fulfillment in their life, and not actually acknowledging, not understanding it. This is a subconscious level of restlessness and stress and just dissatisfaction with things, even though life on the surface looks quite comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, but the reality of it is they say that we're living in the loneliest, most isolated, most hopeless feeling time ever in human history.
Mm.
You know, that's the truth of it. It's like social media was meant to connect us all, and unfortunately the statistics show that it leads to depression and anxiety in teenagers and, you know, let alone adults. Like, it's there's a lot of people out there who feel like they're lacking meaning. And, you know, and speaking, I've had times like that in my life for sure, where I felt, you know, isolated and not connected and lacking meaning and direction in my life. You know, and it depends on what's going on for you. If you go through a series of really hard things, you know, you might be the most confident person in the world sometimes and end up feeling, you know, like, what's the point? What's the point to all this? It's so dependent on your circumstance, I think. And, you know, you see some people living in villages where they have nothing, you know, in certain parts of the world, and they say they have some of the happiest, they have the happiest reporting in statistical analysis of life satisfaction. So it's so dependent on how you perceive things. And, you know, my big thing is just knowing that, you know, we all have a limited time. And even though it's a horrible thing to think about, none of us know, you know, when our time's going to be up. We all know how many hours, days, months, years we've been on this earth, but none of us have the power to know how many days, weeks, months you got left. So I'm so keenly aware of that, and I almost want to grab people and shake them sometimes, because, you're the master of your destiny. You're the one who gets to decide what happens in your life. And I've got a big sign. I always print out signs and put them around my house, or I write on my mirrors. And I've got a sign I printed out the other day that says, only you decide what happens to you this year. Only you decide what your direction is going to be. And I put the responsibility back on myself, but also to empower myself and go, don't you forget that you have this year, and you're lucky to have this year. And don't act like you get to just see what happens, or whatever happens to you is going to happen. Like, take full responsibility. There's a massive amount of pressure in that, but good, because then I know it's on me to go seize opportunities, to create opportunities for myself, to reach out to people, to look after my health, to do all of those things, because no one else is going to ride in and save me. No one else is going to ride in and change my life and make it exactly what I want it to be. I have to do that. And I want to do that. I want to have a really good life. And I think it's making a decision sometimes that you want to have the best life you can possibly have. And that sounds so like a no-brainer. But, if that's how everybody was living, there'd be no weight loss industry. There'd be no need for people to quit gambling or smoking, or, the divorce rate wouldn't be as high as it is. All of those things that you can see people struggle. We all struggle. There's so many ways to make ourselves feel better that don't involve doing the hard yards, and really going after the thing that, might not be fun, but it'll be good for you. So I just really want to, I want to try to connect with as many people as possible to just put that to them, and say, why are you making the choices you're making? And why aren't you going after the thing you really want? Because I think my experience has really taught me, when you sit down and talk to people, whether I'm speaking to 1,000 people at once or afterwards, 10 people come and talk to me and I go one-on-one with them and I say, what is it you want? What is it that you have in your life in the back of your mind that no one knows about that you would actually like to do? What is it that you think you're on this earth to do? What are you hesitating about? Who do you need to talk to that you haven't talked to? And the more specific I get with the examples, the more we come to everybody has something in them that they know they could bring forward, that they know they could be or do or have or say that they haven't done yet. Otherwise, we'd all be completely evolved humans. Like I said before, we'd be married to who we wanted, we'd be millionaires, we'd have the perfect job, we'd have the perfect health. Everybody has something in them that they could be more. They could do more, and if you can bring that out within yourself and then use that 10 seconds of courage tool just to take the first step of action, then you might just create something that, might surprise you, might shock you even, and you might end up with a life, whether it's this year or at the end of your life, where you look back and you go, wow, that was exactly what I wanted it to be. I reached my full potential. I really lived my life instead of letting life or circumstance dictate what I was capable of.
Well, I think the TEDx talk alone is one of those sort of examples of where you sort of cut through that noise and really show people the potential that's in everybody. But the book is sort of next level. I think the amount of detail that you've invested into this book, and when I'm reading, I'm just thinking, like, yes, we've all got our stories, and we've all been through different things and different levels of adversity, but geez, you've certainly had a colourful life so far, and it's continuing as well. And it's
thank you.
But it's really inspiring, and I think it simplifies a lot of the challenges that we all have. And the big thing that I get from the entire book is just the awareness and the clarity around it, because so many of these things, and as you said, when you're drilling in and asking questions with people, then you get to the root cause, and then the person who's answering the questions starts to see everything fall into place and realizes that those next steps are actually quite simple, but we cloud them, we make them more complicated than what they are. And going back to that analogy you said before, I think what the Navy SEALs say, eating an elephant one bite at a time, you sort of simplify everything right down so it's achievable and attainable, and then it only takes that 10 seconds of courage to get to that next step and to progress. And I think a lot of us don't get to stop in our tracks to even have the awareness to begin with. So that's what's really cool about the book, is that you just simplified a lot of these things that for a lot of us, we don't have enough time, or we overcomplicate ourselves in our heads, and we don't have enough time to sort of really sit down and think about what are these feelings, what do they mean, and why do they exist?
You know what it is, Andy, as well, I think, is that most people don't have a mentor in their lives. So I sort of joke that Sensei Benny was my Mr. Miyagi. And it doesn't matter how many hundreds or thousands of people I get to go and talk to. I often say, who has a mentor? Very few people put their hands up, because it's hard to create those relationships and then make them official, if that makes sense. Sometimes people have business mentors, but how many people have a life mentor? And you know, it's finding someone that makes enough sense to you that you can learn from them. And I was lucky. Like, I think of Sensei Benny like school. Like, he would literally make me write things down like I was doing a test, or, you know, take notes on things. And he would ask me questions that I then had to go and answer. And that was mentoring. That was somebody to really make me reflect and come up with answers. And then once I told him the answer, I also knew the answer. So, you know, I would challenge you personally and your listeners. You know, you were saying to me how many different things that in my book that you had clarity on, and the different experiences. I would ask you and the people listening, have you ever really written down some of the, even in bullet points, some of the things you've been through, some of the experiences? So if you put one column on the left, these are the things that I've been through that taught me some resilience. You know, I had this hard thing, that hard thing, or these challenges at work that came out here. And then the column on the right, put down, you know, all the things that you're proud of, that you've learned, that you've done. Who are you? You know, since I've been asked me all the time, who are you? And in my book, there's a thing called the I am concept that I touch on, which is basically writing a giant list of who you are. And it's the act of putting it out of your head onto paper that gives you clarity. And when you have clarity, you can make better decisions. So, you know, I challenge you, if you're up for it, to, you know, just write that list. Write down, imagine you were going to write a book, and just spend, you know, make yourself a coffee and spend 10 minutes writing a couple of little columns of what you've been through in your life, what's taught you, what's made you who you are. And, you know, it's that kind of almost schoolwork that we don't often get asked to do in our lives. So it's hard to articulate who you are and what you've been through, and to have those things front of mind when you're trying to challenge yourself and go through new experiences. So that's what I'm very lucky I get to do that with people now. I get to do mindset coaching with people online or in person, and I'm doing some courses this year. So if this makes sense to anyone listening, you know, and they want to go a little bit deeper and answer some questions within themselves and challenge themselves with their 10 seconds of courage, they can connect with me on Instagram or Facebook, or if they go to my website, it's nadinechampion.com, they can get a free download of one of the chapters of my book, and that'll also put them onto my mailing list. So when things come up, or you know, I create some content this year, they can connect further with some of those things that I was taught, that I'm very grateful to be able to pass on and share with other people now.
I've got homework now. I've got homework, and
everybody's got homework. Cool.
And I'll have to sign up to the mailing list as well, because I think, I mean, a lot of friends of mine, and I've certainly seen this sort of in my circles, you know, being a musician, and a lot of my friends and peers are musicians as well. And I've seen a massive shift over the last few years with the way that I think we're all trying to improve ourselves, and I think we're searching for different perspectives outside of the music industry as well. And I think we've been very insular for so many years, and mental health's a big topic across all industries and just, you know, humanity at the moment. But it's a big thing that is a big discussion point. And I think ultimately people are struggling with things such as mental health for you know, medical reasons, but also for a lot of personal struggles that they don't have clarity over, and a lot of mindset stuff. And so this sort of stuff is really, really important. So I'll definitely link everybody to all your socials and the website as well, and sign up for the mailing list, because there's just so much stuff, and I think there's a lot of value in just getting a bit more awareness about yourself and what you're capable of, and really sort of understanding that it's okay to feel these feelings, but understanding what you can do with those feelings is such a big thing.
Absolutely. And, you know, people often get taught the idea. It's like what I was saying at TEDx. I didn't want to get up and share the concept. What people I find are missing, you can find the concepts on the internet, in books, all of that stuff for free in 5 seconds, but it's the how. So I need to be more positive. How do I be more positive? Yeah. I need to back myself and believe in myself more. Yeah, but how? And so what I was so lucky to be taught was the how. do this exercise, write this down, start to tell yourself this every day, put this sign up on your wall that you see every day to confront yourself with what you need to do. It's all these practical little steps that, it's what's missing in so much, because you can read all the positive memes on Instagram and go, right, yeah, I need to feel like this today, but there's no practical depth of knowledge necessarily behind it.
No.
If I don't feel like that and I want to, how do I go about it? So that's kind of my mission, and I guess the scary thing for me this year is to really start creating some content and putting it out there in a way that gives people something practical to do if it makes sense to them, because, I won't make sense to everybody, and even the people that I make sense to, maybe only half of those people would be willing to put pen to paper and act on some of the things that we're talking about. That's what I said before. It's the difference between the mindset and the physical action. And luckily I had somebody who I truly respected who kept bringing me back to the physical action of writing it down, because, there were plenty of things he asked me to write down that I didn't want to. I didn't think I needed to. I didn't think it applied to me. And he kept coming back and saying, did you write that yet? And because I respected him and I was a little scared of him, I did it. I did it despite myself, and I acted in my own best interest. And it had a profoundly powerful effect on the way I lived my life. And, like I've said a number of times during this great chat we've had, I just really am keenly aware that life's short, and it's a pretty wild way to live your life once you start thinking that way. So it's not about, being sad that life is short. It's about really embracing, I've got today, and I'm looking right now at a beautiful blue sky, and, I have everything that I need in my day. I've got food to eat and water to drink, and I'm in good health, and I'm going to try to make the absolute best of my day today. And it started well by talking to you. So thank you so much for having me on, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you and your listeners.
If you want to reach out to Nadine, you can go to nadinechampion.com. I'll have links to her Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn profiles. Everything will be in the show notes over at andysocial.net. Or if you're using a mobile device, a podcast player, you should be able to click through or scroll up into the show notes, and there'll be a bunch of clickable links there as well. So lots of easy ways to connect with Nadine. Go and check out her book, 10 Seconds of Courage. I'll have a link in the show notes where you can purchase that book, or you can just search online. There's heaps of places that you can grab this book, but highly recommended. One of the best books that I read last year. And as I mentioned in the episode and at the beginning of this chat, it is just a book that has just given me a lot of clarity around the feelings that I have on a day-to-day basis. And it's just simplified a lot of stuff and given me some real insight and actions that I can take to just manage these things, these events and these circumstances that we all find ourselves in on a day-to-day basis. And there's just a lot of great lessons that Nadine's learned and has now passed on to all of us. So go and check out 10 Seconds of Courage. You can go to nadinechampion.com. You can click on the show notes. I'll dump everything in there as well. And really hope that you're able to get something out of this and get as much as I did from Nadine's amazing story. And Nadine, thank you so much. What a great chat. Okay, so Lorde updates. No new album news yet. Fallen Idols is still pending. Don't know exactly when that release date is. I'm just chomping at the bit to sort of get something out there. Seems to be a reoccurring theme with this band. We plan things and it doesn't go to plan. But we're still negotiating with Japan. That's going to be the ongoing narrative for the time being, for the foreseeable future. But in the meantime, please go and check out our first song off the album. It's track 1 off the album. So it's a great way to kick off this new release. And first single is called United. Welcome back. You can find it on YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, and or you can go to lorde.net.au/united. It's all over there. It gives, actually, if you go to that website, it gives you a full track listing for the Australian release of the album, which will be available on CD. And there's a couple of covers on there. And let's just say, if this whole Japan thing works out the way that we're hoping, there will be a completely different version available in the Chinese. Yeah, let's get into China. Someone help me. In the Japanese market. So go over to lorde.net.au/united. Lots of really interesting information about the new album. If you grab, we've got a few of the United shirts left. Sorry guys, I'm all over the shop today. I've got a few of the United t-shirts left. We jacked up the price a bit because pre-orders have now ceased. So sorry folks, you snooze, you lose. But you can get a t-shirt, but you also get a free download of the new song, plus about 20 preview tracks from the upcoming new album. So if you want something just to tide you over until the new album's actually out, you can grab that. You can download it separately to the t-shirt. I think it's about $10 or something like that. But, you can get, there's intro tracks from Tim, who gives a little bit of a narrative around each of the songs, where they come from, a little bit of a did you know, and about 30-second samples of each song from the new album. So it'll give you a really good taste of what's in store. There's some really cool stuff. So go and check all that out, lord.net.au, links through to our Bandcamp page, and or you can go to andysocial.net/buy stuff and click on the Lord link there as well. Self-Starter, I have kicked off recordings. I'm in the midst of it, down deep in the thick of recording season 2 of Self-Starter. That will kick off, I don't know the exact date, whatever the first Monday in June is. So my schedule for releasing new episodes for Self-Starter has always been Mondays at 5 a.m. And the reason for that, I don't know whether this actually works, but I figure if it syncs up and you subscribe to the Self-Starter podcast, then it's going to show up in your podcast player as you kick off your week. And I think it's a great little dose of inspiration and get you motivated for the week ahead, especially if you're working a crummy job that you want to get out of. So if you want to go back, listen to season 1, selfstarter.com.au, or search for Self-Starter on your podcast player. I've pretty much got all of my guests locked in for season 2. However, in the event that somebody pulls out on me, send me some recommendations. I'd love to have some backups just in case. And I can also write them down for season 3 as well, eventually. But I won't get ahead of myself. But go and check it out, selfstarter.com.au. And season 2 will be out in June. But that's about it, folks. I don't think there's anything else I'm going to rattle off. Go over to andysocial.net/buy stuff if you want to get anything from my eBay stores, Discogs. So that's all CDs, vinyl, DVDs, cassettes, music, hard rock, metal, punk, all sorts of shit in between. eBay's got lots of weird and wonderful stuff on there, including music related stuff. The Andy Social online store is there. The Lord online store is there. The Domus online store is there. It's all there. andysocial.net/buy stuff. And you can, that's a massive support to me, and you might pick up some really cool shit as well. And maybe send me a message. If you do order anything from any of those links, and you mention that you heard this via the Andy Social podcast, then I might add in some extra little fun items for you as well. We'll see how we go. All right, folks, that's it. Enough of me crapping on. Another podcast in the bag. More to come. Lots and lots and lots of guests. All right, I've got to stop talking because, anyway. All right, next week. Ta-ta. Take care. Bye-bye.